please all rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, without counsel, everybody be good.
Thank you all for coming today to the Board of Trustees public session on August 22nd. We start off this meeting with public comment, which we have quite a few here. First on the list, Evelyn Conrad.
Good evening, Mayor Mike, members of the Board of Trustees, Evelyn Conrad, 18 South Roscoe Drive, Southampton. As you know, I have been asking urgently for a new comprehensive plan where the residents can say what they want in terms of our village growth and in terms of preservation. But tonight, that's not my message because there is a serious legal caveat that I need to tell you about because at this point it would be on your turf. First of all, though, there's so much misinformation about me in this village that allow me briefly to tell you why I'm qualified to give you that legal opinion. I have a JD and LLM from the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. The LLM is sort of synonymous with, like an MA in a different field. I'm qualified to appear in any of the courts of the state of New York, federal courts like SDNY and EDNY, Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and I'm a member of the bar of the United States Supreme Court. In other words, if someone chose to hire me, I could argue before that group. I'm saying this not to huff and puff, but at a recent party, I was introduced as a writer. I was also told by a local lawyer that you catch more flies with honey. I assure you I'm not here to catch flies or to spread honey. I am here for very serious legal purposes. So let me first, just because I don't think you all read the letters to the editor, this is not what it's about, and forgive me, it's a little crunched, but I gave a copy of each. I'm sorry Mr. Bruin is not here. The legal caveat has to do with the fact that I know of just 3 applications to the ZBA and ARB from my Roscoe Place subdivision, which are illegal. They have been illegally noticed. Now, this is now on your turf, so I hope you will stop all applications from that area. Of course, I wish you would do it for the entire village, until your attorney has a chance, or I have a chance to give you information in front of him to show you why there are so many illegalities. One of the most obvious is there is no 90 Leo's Lane. That house that looks like a third-rate apartment building in Queens, I guess, is illegal. It doesn't belong in Roscoe. There's an empty lot. Those are 2 parts of the back end of a ox pasture road property, and it's been let out on us. But that's the least of it. The first 2 spec builders in our area, which were Christopher Burnside and Kevin Maple, Kevin, that was his 11th and 12th spec house in the village, were told that they should buy 2 properties at once, and they were given an okay on the second one before a public hearing was announced. One of those areas is your friends the Mortimers. They're not part of this, but they own a house that Burnside got without any public hearing, and the house across from it. And of course, there are the 2 Maple properties, which are directly opposite the residence of our former village attorney, Rick DePetris. I think my gong has rung, but I would like to say that any time you'd give me a chance to talk to you privately and show you documentation, I'd be happy to do so, especially with your new attorney present. It's very important. I thank you.
He's missing.
No, missing in action.
Thank you, Evelyn. Jeff Rutley?
No, I just put my name down just in case. Just in case I chose to talk. This is the extent of my comment. You all look great, how about that?
Perfect. Well, so do you.
That's my comment for the evening.
Rich? Yes?
Hi, good evening. My name is Rich Delaquilla. I live at 227 Halsey Street. I'm not sure if this is the right forum for this, so if it's not, I apologize, and you guys can just ask me to step down. I was actually just coming to ask if it's possible to consider evaluating or looking at the speed limit on Halsey Street and perhaps a couple of other village lanes. I've lived there for 5 years now. I have young kids. The speed limit's 30. I know we have some other streets in town that are wider where it's 25. And so my only request was that, I would be willing to help do the work or whatnot, whether we could just consider potentially lowering the speed limit to 25 and maybe considering dropping in 1 or 2 more stop signs along Halsey Street just to break up the flow of traffic. As you know, everything's become crowded and busy and people use it as a cut through. And we're one of many families on the street, so it would just be helpful. So.
Yeah, Rich, we're taking a look at a number of streets in the village. We've also identified the roads that are being used as cut-throughs. So I think you'll see some speed limit changes coming.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, change your mind.
Well, I will make, if I could, one comment. Since I live on...
Jeff, you gotta come up.
Jeff, you gotta come up.
It's really not a comment.
It's all on camera, so.
Okay. Just being a wise guy. So Jeff Broadley at 166 Halsey Street, and whether it's by your doing or by the chief of police, there are policemen now on the corner of Halsey and Almond. At least I know I come to a full stop. So, and there have been signs that have been posted, maybe it's you, that say if you drive on this street, drive on the street like your children do.
Yeah.
So I think other people see it as well.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment. I think we do have a real problem over in that area, especially West Prospect leading into Moses.
Yeah.
And Moses itself, we all know it. Traffic has really been increasing in that area over the last couple of years. And I think another hard part about this is that we have a lot of trucks coming through there, especially in the morning and late afternoon. And some of those trucks really shouldn't be on those roads, except for local deliveries. I have one person, in fact, I have a letter here, he contacted Fred Thiel. I'm going to talk about that at the end. Fred made some suggestions for us, and I personally feel that it's gotten to such a point that we really need to have a study in that area on those little side streets over there, because it's not fair, and it has become a cut-through. It backs up on McGee Street,
Right.
Across the railroad tracks, and it's out of control. And I'm not saying that our village is the only place, because if you're in the town and you go over to North McGee, is it North McGee? It's a cut through as well. Backs up. I just can't even believe that people get on that, go there, and North Bishops, and they get on it, and they are on it for 45 minutes before they get through the light. To me, that's not a savings. I'd rather get on the road and sit on the road, but it's what's happening now, and it has to do with workforce housing. Not workforce, traffic. It has to do with, all of that, and it's not fair to the people who live there. I don't know. We really have to study on how we're going to fix it, if we can.
Another aspect of that, on our street, on Halsey Street, and I'm sure in some of the others, it's exacerbated by the overnight on the street parking and during the day parking, when in fact I see driveways that, yes, if they so chose to, they could have their cars stacked, but for convenience sake, they park it on the street. I'm not saying everybody should get a ticket, but maybe a nice little warning saying to use your driveway.
I will say that on a couple of occasions...
You got to...
Sorry. I was just, maybe this is an offline conversation. On a couple of occasions, I've once in a while been guilty of that. Not because we have a long driveway, but we always use the back of the driveway. But we do sometimes stick a car on the street just to slow the traffic down. Because I'd rather put something out there than, like I said, you saw my 2-year-old trying to destroy the AV equipment before, but a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And it is a narrow street, but, you know, the folks who are ripping through there, unfortunately, aren't, you know, I know how it is. People get busy, they're rushed. You know, it's the nature of what happens out here when things get busy. I get it, but it takes a split second, and we end up with a tragedy on our hands. It's not worth it, so.
I've noticed it in my neighborhood too, and I think part of it is when you have a smaller lot, like you do over in Halsey and in that area as well as on my street, you don't have a long driveway. I mean, and so if you have 2 cars of your own, and then you have a guest or 2 or 3, they can't park in your driveway. So they have to park on the street. But I am concerned about the overnight parking. You know, there has to be a reason for that. So.
Yeah, appreciate the consideration.
Well, Evelyn, there's a couple of people that have stuff here.
Make very good driveways.
Is that okay?
That's okay.
Regina Grieven from 375 Ox Pasture Road. Apropos what they were just saying, at about 3:30 in the afternoon, Ox Pasture now has become the new highway. It gets blocked up on Hill Street, so they go zooming down. And my daughter, where she has her twin staying with us, she had to follow 1 car because he was going 60 miles an hour going down Ox Pasture. And she caught up with him, and I won't say what she said, but it was pretty rough. Anyway, and the second thing is when you come down Culver Street and you're heading toward Job's Lane, at the corner there where you have the Home Nature shop is on the corner, on the left, I would submit that perhaps a stop sign could be put, because there is a stop sign from the traffic coming from the right, and there is one from Culver Street, but the people coming from the other way, some of them are turning corners, so you don't see them until they're practically on top of you. So a stop sign there might be a good idea if that can be worked out. Okay, and can we get some speed bumps on Ox Pasture?
Well, I have to say, we had talked about speed bumps a while ago, and we said, they won't allow them, but according to Fred Thiel, you can have them.
Oh, really? Because it's becoming, particularly in the summertime, it's really becoming terrible.
Yep.
And we come out of our driveway, we have to
I'm just
inch out
imagining
because somebody
everyone
could hit
wanting
us,
them, though.
you know?
So you were never going to make it down a street without, like
Yeah, well,
this,
that's
like this. And you can't have that in the village.
No, but 1 or 2 here or there might be
Yeah.
help, you know. Thank you.
Right.
Evelyn?
Just I have total sympathy for that. And Halsey is worse than the others because Prospect and Halsey are the way to avoid the village traffic from the railroad station and from the Omni. And so it's very popular, and I hope you do something. I use it all the time, by the way, carefully.
Moving along, Missy Lubner?
Can I have my neighbor, my next-door neighbor, speak
Sure,
to me?
yep, absolutely.
Yoga?
You can all come up.
It's only for groups, okay?
It's more efficient.
Just if you could
I'm
introduce
Missy
yourself.
Lubliner. I live at 5 Halsey Path, Southampton.
Robert Rohr at 11 Halsey Path.
Michael Bierman, 1 Halsey Path.
Good. Apologize for the informal address. I'm coming from work. I own Tennis East at 73 Main Street. I'm a new resident on 11 Halsey Path. I'm spending my first summer there, and unbeknownst to me, my street has become a parking lot. I brought some
Commercial trucks.
Yes, I brought some pictures here. I apologize if there's not enough copies for everybody, but it's become a major issue. Starting at roughly 6:30, 6:45 every single morning, all of the commercial vehicles come onto our street. I counted 19 this morning.
I counted 20.
Okay, not one of the vehicles is performing work on our street. I've spoken with my neighbors about this. It's become a park and ride. They essentially show up, unload their materials, hop into another vehicle, and then leave for the day.
I think it's important to say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
The project that they're parking for is on Fowler Street. There's a very large residential project, and as you know, Fowler Street is no parking. I've been at the property now for 8 years on Halsey Path. one of the newer cul-de-sacs, and
There are 3 different sets of pictures just to show how many cars and vehicles. I apologize.
so there's no parking for the most part from Halsey Path all the way to Fowler Beach. So, people will come and use our street to park and make a half-mile walk to the beach, which is pleasant.
But they get picked up. The major issue, and I hope this is the proper forum for presenting this, but it's become a safety issue. I have 2 young children. There are other young children on the block. Because they're commercial vehicles and they come and they essentially spend the whole day there, it's effectively a 1-lane street. The cul-de-sac curves to the left, so it becomes essentially a blind turn. I sit on my horn hoping that somebody doesn't come. The other day, I had a big, giant F-150 Ford pickup truck come at a very rapid pace. I literally had to blast my horn at the guy to slow down so that I wouldn't get hit. I'm really concerned. My children ride their bikes. They're in the neighborhood. I leave in the morning to go to work. I don't know what's coming down the street, so.
I think what we're asking for is there a possibility to get not no parking, because we don't want to be selfish to the community who wants to residentially park there and walk to the beach, but maybe no commercial parking.
Or no 9 to 6, or no only 2 hours, something.
So
But it
let
would
me get
apply to
this
you
right.
guys as well. That's the only
They
trick to that.
found a loophole.
We're okay with that. I think
So I want to,
we couldn't park on the street. That's
Yeah,
not an
we'd
issue.
be okay with that.
We have driveways that could support multiple vehicles. The problem here is, and if work is being done at our house, we would of course have the commercial vehicles parked within our homes or on our property.
And get a pass?
I think it's frustrating because it's the Fowler home near the beach, and if they were able to get some type of temporary permit that allows for their home being built, their subcontractors to park their commercial vehicles in front of their construction project, it wouldn't be a problem. It is still an eyesore to that street, but that's, I guess.
And they're the town, and we're the village, so they're taking advantage?
Right. I had a long conversation with Inspector Perez today about the situation. He's confirmed that he has gone on the street. He has seen how many vehicles are there and the time. So perhaps members, the mayor and members of the board here could perhaps follow up with him to confirm this. I hope the pictures show and prove and are evidence that we have a major problem. It's an iPhone, I'm sorry. It's the best they can do.
I have many.
but you were saying that you didn't mind the beach traffic parking there? Because that's
No,
pretty-
It hasn't, over the last 8 years, it's never been taken advantage of. There'll be random cars and families will park there and take a half-mile walk to the beach, and that's fine, it's pleasant. It's when you have literally 25 massive trucks, and like Rob
I
was
had an
referring to.
18-wheeler vehicle twice this week park on the street and block the driveway of my next-door neighbor yesterday, Monday, but the neighbor wasn't there.
But they're getting picked up on our street and shuttled over to the construction.
Have other projects done this as well, or is it this present project is where it's, have other projects, work projects used this
This is the
street?
first time in 8 years this has happened. There's been projects on our street, and you respect your neighbors, and they have to get their work done, and that's fine. But when you see something being done a half mile away and using our street as a parking lot and a shuttle service, it just doesn't
Can I
seem
also
right.
add, it's not only the Fowler Street project, I also have seen commercial vehicles park and then walk across the street to the development for Dune, because there's no parking on for Dune. I would think if you're having work performed at your home, you should be considerate enough to the community and your neighbors to allow the commercial vehicles to park on your property.
Are these vehicles staying here at night, or are they only?
No, they're all being cleared out. Last night, the vehicles stayed till about 7. There were 3 vehicles that were there.
About 11 hours straight.
Also, I'm by myself sometimes, and there's cars just like in the road. I'm afraid to go in the house, and there's litter. They leave litter. They shouldn't be there.
I feel that when you buy a property on a cul-de-sac, you buy it for certain reasons.
To see a beautiful view.
And also because you have children and you know it's not a heavily trafficked street. And now it's
one of the
becoming-
major considerations in our purchasing the home there.
I guess the
Because
big...
one thing, I used to actually live on Halsey Street at 163, so I completely concur with everything that they're saying. One of the reasons why we left 163 Halsey Street was to be on a nice, quiet cul-de-sac.
Right.
Now, do you notice, is there any sheet of paper in the windows, a permit?
Nothing.
Nothing,
Inside?
absolutely
I've
not.
spoken to them. It's men at work, and they just shuttle themselves over.
I think the interesting question would be if we're one of the last streets in the village that is where there is no sign that says no parking.
Yeah.
By definition, we're going to wind up being this massive parking lot for the duration.
I
Yeah, you
concur.
will be.
So may we ask, how do we petition that no parking signs be erected on the street so that this problem doesn't continue and that it is a safe, quiet street? And it's the home of my dreams. I've spent a lot of years. This is where I want my kids to, play.
All of us.
My kids can't play on the street.
Right.
Well, we'll talk to Angel Perez, see what his take is on it, and then we'll talk to the chief of police, and we'll go down there and take a look.
Great. Thank you. It's
Thank you
Monday
very
through
much.
Friday, 6:30 a.m. till 6 p.m. So thank you very much for hearing us.
Could you leave Steve with your
You have a card?
number or card? or-
Yeah, I'll give you my information. Let me see if I have a tenant.
Thank you very much.
I'm right up the street.
Thank you, guys.
Robert, would you like me to write it or?
Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind.
Cars are the biggest problem.
I can't believe the number.
Well, it's like we allow we give 10 passes for Meadow Lane and stuff like that and other roads, but this is town, so that's why.
Yeah.
For doing it in town.
But they're working in the town and parking in the village.
Yeah.
We're calling on Jay next. Jay wants to...
Hi, J.D. Singh, resident of the Village at 109 Old Town Crossing, and I heard you mention narrow lane, but I know that that's also been a spot. Does that have an agreement, a formal agreement, that they're being able to use that?
They have passes. They're actually issued temporary passes for the duration of the project, and they're supposed to put them in the windshield. So,
Yeah, because most of them,
That's usually how
I
it's
haven't
handled.
seen them in the windshields, but obviously there's a little more room on that, and this time of year, we've obviously got the space. I mean, would it be possible for the school to rent some of their parking lot to these people? I mean, maybe they could make some money out of this.
go to the school.
And so maybe we could talk with the schools. I mean, obviously that would not work during the school year, but certainly for the busy times when people are out here and the place is so crowded, maybe our schools could use those parking lots for parking and earn a little bit of money. Help the tax rate.
Yeah, right.
I'm looking out for you, Morris. Thank you.
I can't really read the next one. It's Sophia. Yeah, just-
Hi, my name is Bradley Phillips. I'm actually, Mr. and Mrs. Steck are my clients for 29 Aldrich Lane in Southampton Village. I had told them that I would speak for them because they have they're from Poland and they have a little bit of a problem communicating everything in English. So an issue that's been ongoing for quite some time now with Aldrich Lane has been the congregating of all the people outside by the 7-Eleven, and it seems to be posing an issue to them more recently than ever for the fact that they're trying to sell their home, and most recently they've had people like hit the front of their car when they've been trying to come down the street to go to their own home. Mr. Steck was telling me that he was outside trimming his bushes the other day, and somebody had basically yelled through the bushes to him to see what he was doing at his own house. And it just seems to be an issue that nobody can resolve. In the police department, they said that there's nothing that they could do because technically the people who are gathering there are really doing nothing wrong. But I mean, it seems to be to us that they kind of are doing wrong by them. They're taxpayers and they can't enjoy their home because of non-taxpayers congregating by their house. So
I had spoken to Chief about it because they had not kindly sent us a letter recently.
yes,
There was an indication that there was more activity on Sunday than anything else. I guess they're eating and
leaving the litter and
leaving the
praying
litter
and-
and stuff. And he had told me he was going to make sure that he patrolled that area on Sunday. You know, I mean, it's certainly day laborers is a national issue, and it's well beyond the scope of the local village, but we certainly will help in any way we can.
So is there anything that, we can do in the meantime while we're trying to fix the issue? Is there?
Well, their ability to stand and organize there is not a restricted ability. They have full rights on doing that. But if they do use that county park, then we need to know about it, because that was a CPF fund purchase, and they can't go in there and have events staged in there.
Right.
And also, obviously, if they're being harassed through the hedge, then we need to know about it.
So they call the police if they have these particular issues?
Yep, absolutely.
How far up on Aldridge are they?
The first house right behind 7-Eleven. I mean, it poses more of an issue for them than anybody else on the block, but I mean, if you tried, I've turned on the block myself and stopped to put an open house sign out and literally been approached by about 3 or 4 of them. If I wasn't, a young man, I probably would have gotten back in my car and left, and Aldrich Lane would have never seen me again. And that's an issue when somebody is even considering making that their new home. It's kind of a bad look for Southampton Village.
You should go right in the house and call the police then, if they've approached you.
Okay.
Yeah, any approach that
that you're uncomfortable
unwanted with, call the police.
Okay, so that's what we could do for now until particular issues.
The problem is there are no loitering laws. So, years ago you used to have loitering laws, which meant that if people were standing around hanging out somewhere, you could ask them to move along. You can't do that anymore. So that is an issue.
Okay.
So we're trying to figure out, and we're glad that you've come, because we'll have to figure out a way to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much for taking the time to hear the issue.
Thank you.
Horace?
My name is Horace Bliss. I'm a village resident, 88 Meadow Lane. I respectfully request that Mr. Gobler address the subject of Southampton Town and its sewage problem. I appeared before the Southampton Town Board public hearing and wrote a letter addressed to Mr. Bouvier, or Councilman Bouvier, and to the board, suggesting that the 3 cesspools that the Southampton Town uses might be part of a, shall we say, a program to either do something about it or put in a septic system. If you look at the Southampton Town Hall, which pays no taxes in the village of Southampton, and deprives us of being able to collect taxes on that property if they left, they sit there. They probably are the largest source of urine and fecal material in the village that I know of. And if you look across Southampton Town Hall and look at the elementary school and take a short walk across the parking lot, you're at Agawam Park and Agawam Lake. And the Southampton Town CPF funds are being directed to 2%, or the 20% of the 2%, being directed towards what is going to happen in the next 5, 10, or 20 years, and that's a wonderful program, an important program which I support. But I think Southampton Town Hall and the school districts can do something about their cesspool work, can do it quickly, quietly, and efficiently, and I believe between the 3 schools and Southampton Town Hall, they're the largest source of nitrogen and phosphoric acid in this community. And I took that position with the Southampton Town Board at the public hearing about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I would like to get Mr. Christopher J. Gobler, who's an expert on this, to talk about it. I've not read his presentation. Maybe it covers it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. Mike Bingman, or? No? Fran? Everybody's leaving around you.
Good evening, Francis Adamczewski, 40 West Prospect Street, Southampton. I could speak for hours talking about West Prospect, Halsey Street, the people that just left. That was my grandmother's house. It's right next to 7-Eleven. I understand their plight. But tonight I'm here to talk about the roads. Looks like we had made some progress here, and I'm happy, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the output from the village here. And I went to a surf rider meeting the other night, and they were talking about wind power, and the subject of the Mylar balloons came up. And we all hate Mylar balloons, as we all know it, because hundreds of them wash up on our shores, in our bays, in our backyards, in our trees, in our bushes. I was talking to one of the gentlemen who was on the board and said he wanted to come, but I guess he couldn't make it tonight. He said we really don't want to put the people out of business, but said maybe we can think of some way of taking the helium out of the balloons so they don't float away. Put them on a stick with a piece of string or something like that to alleviate their flights so much. So maybe you could look into that, maybe have them stop using helium in the balloons around here. So I don't want to stop people's livelihood. I know there's 2 balloon shops, I believe, in Southampton. I'm not sure. I think there's 2. But we don't want to stop their livelihood, but we sure don't like the balloons.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk to them about, the helium in the balloons so they don't float away or go up into our power lines. And
I don't think that the Mylar balloon people were the local people. I think they came from another area.
okay, well, it's still balloons. I hate balloons, so
Right.
they're in our waters. They're everywhere, so it's...
Our friend, I'll tell you, the surf riders, I can't remember when they sent me, but they sent me a note, and they did a beach cleanup, not in Southampton, but I think it was Sagaponack they said they were in.
We do it everywhere.
Yeah.
Hampton Bays, Sagaponack, Montauk,
And
we're everywhere.
in that one outing of a beach cleanup, they collected over 100 Mylar balloons.
Yeah, that was one person. That was one person who collected over 100 balloons. So.
I agree with you 100% that they're a problem, and the problem is that they're made out of a metal sheathing, so they last forever.
Well, maybe we can change
And they don't deflate.
Aspect of the balloons and change them to so they're biodegradable.
Yep,
I don't know if they can do that, but it would sure be nice.
I agree with you. Yep.
And one other thing, Coopers. We're talking about, I don't know what they use as utensils there, but we're trying to make restaurants eco-friendly that are around the water, change the plastic spoons into bamboo spoons and forks, and if somebody doesn't want a straw, and do away with plastic cups, use paper cups instead of plastic cups. Maybe we can work with somebody who's going to bid on Cooper's Beach next year, or whoever is going to put the bid in, to ask them to be more eco-friendly. Thank you.
It's a good point.
It's a good point.
Great point.
And that's about it, and I appreciate all the help. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Frank.
Next is Robert Rahr. Robert? I think he was. Yeah. And the last one, can't quite gather its script, Zach?
Marianne Zagaria.
Yeah, that's it.
I'd like to introduce myself to everyone on the board and the mayor. I'm Marianne Zagaria. I've lived here in the village since the early 70s in the same house on Gin Lane. My husband and I have never had a problem here in the village. My last name appears prominently in various areas throughout town. Not that I'm boasting. My husband was a very shy person, just happened to have a few bucks, and he believed in sharing. So the dilemma I'm faced with now is, as we all know, on the beach we've had the plovers. God bless those little plovers. But the plovers left, like they say in Spanish, se fue como la luna. They left like the moon leaves, okay? So where are our beach cleaners? This has been going on from Memorial Day weekend. We're looking at Labor Day weekend. So where are these guys that we're paying for in their shiny new trucks, all their little toys to clean a beach, but the beach doesn't get cleaned? So I took it upon myself last week to do 90,000 square feet of cleanup. Myself and my gardeners did 300 across, 300 down to the water. I brought in what I could carry physically. This was the lightest log I could bring in of dozens on the beach. This was a bit heavier. This, with all its nails, was on the beach, where children, I have 3 young children in my house between the ages of 8 and 9 that play on this beach, as well as hundreds of other children. So now, as I said, Monday, 8 o'clock in the morning, before people come to the beach, I had my gardeners assemble and we marched through. We collected everything and I left it next to the garbage pails of Crider Lane, adjacent to my property. I then, a few hours later, by the way, I did call Gary Gillespie. I was told that he was the supervisor of Public Works. I didn't get a call back. That I did 10 days ago when the plovers were finished and the fences came down. And every morning at 7:30, I listen for the hum of the beach cleaning machines, but they're not there. But they are there at the Bathing Corporation, and they are there at Cooper, but somewhere in between, they don't come. I guess the plovers don't hear those. Anyhow, I get a Paul came to my house yesterday, also he said he was a supervisor of Public Works, and he came with the police. Today, 2 policemen came. I'm being threatened with a subpoena because I cleaned up their mess. And as I said to this Paul, who I did call back yesterday because he left his card, I said to him, I don't know, but I did like half your job. He told me, well, you can call up Nozick and have them remove. I said, oh, I would know how to do that. I said, but being I did half your job and I'm not giving you half the bill for the cleanup, you can do the other half and remove the pieces that I left there. I brought photos of what I left there. There's a bin this big where a bonfire was, a big metal thing. It doesn't even matter. There's wood like this, there's logs like this. There was a party Sunday night, very nice, quiet. But when I got out there Monday morning, there were hundreds of clamshells dumped in a circle, so they must have had a barrel that they just overturned and figured, well, seashells, sand, it goes. Well, I had to tell that to the bees and the roaches and the flies that were crawling all over this. I also got that off the beach. So I'm faced with a dilemma where I'm being pursued by the police now on a daily basis, yesterday and today, and being threatened with subpoenas to go to court. So, what do? Do I pick up all the garbage and throw it back on the beach where I found it, because that's my next move?
Most of the stuff, I gather, you picked up in front of your house.
I did, like I said, 90,000 square feet. I started with my next door neighbor, the Barishes, and went straight through to Crider Lane.
Well, you aren't the only person.
And yes, my house just happened to fall in that area. You wanted me to go further down the beach?
No. But you aren't the only person that came into the same situation, and the way the Parks Department looks at it is that, the debris that's in front of your house is your debris, and you should dispose of it accordingly.
No.
However,
What do you mean? On the public beach, it's my
No, not on the public beach, in front of your house.
You mean to the main high tide water line that I own?
Yes.
Oh, that's clean.
Yeah.
The main high tide water line is my property. That's clean, yeah.
But there have been a number of people on Jim Lane who have had the same situation where they've
Maybe.
collected a bunch of wood.
Yeah?
Maybe we can get you all together and we do a cleanup day, and then the village can help out and dispose
Oh,
of
that's
this.
great. Now, will that be deducted from my taxes that I'm paying towards
Oh, I
this?
don't think so.
And how about Paul's new shiny Suburban truck that he came with? That
Well,
I
he may
found out was
scratch that a bit when he loads it
I
up.
thought maybe it was his personal, but it wasn't, because it says Public Works on it. Just let me know. And do I submit my bill? Because tomorrow my gardeners are giving me the bill for their 3 hours of work. And what happens with the garbage that I left there? And I have photos of all the garbage.
Talk to him about the garbage.
And this is the first I heard that I am personally responsible for cleaning up the public beach.
Not a public beach, a property in front of your house.
The main high tide water line is spotless.
Yep.
You can roll
Maybe.
around in
I
there.
don't
You
know.
won't find wood like this with nails, that's for
Could
sure.
very
And I will
well
be submitting those other photos to your office,
Okay.
okay? And show you I left it all in front of the garbage pails there. Now, Norsec comes to your pails and picks up the garbage. So just let me know what's going to happen with that garbage. I don't want police coming to my house, it's private property. I don't want them walking onto my house. Or Paul or Gary, who has never returned a call.
Yep. That's fair.
That's it. Nice meeting you all.
I'll speak to him tomorrow and go down there and take a look at it.
Yeah.
To see exactly what.
Tell them not
Yeah,
to
if you
threaten
could.
people.
If you could get him to pick it up.
Oh,
Any-
should I leave the wood with the nails and the short wood? Give it to Gary tomorrow, give it to Gillespie, whatever his name is. Tell him it's a souvenir. And I got the latest one that I brought in. I'll leave it to people as well.
Yeah.
I have photos of it.
Anybody else from the public that would like to make a comment? Okay.
I had a
Moving on.
question from Ms. Zachariah. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Good enough.
Thank
I
you.
answered everything that
You had mentioned that there was an event at the beach and that they dropped various detritus onto the beach property.
I know about various, the clams,
Okay.
all the little shells were certainly for that.
And that was Sunday night on Kreider?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the mean high tide water line, by the way. Very close to my property. They couldn't get it further down to the Kreider Street.
Well, that one's easy to fix. Then we find out who's catering the party, and then
Well, that's
an easy one to address.
That's an easy thing, and I did report it to John's department, that whoever that was, just tell them they left several hundred clam shells. Little necks, by the way.
Good ones.
It's really the debris like this. There's no need for it. And there's a lot of wood like this with nails bruised off houses. I don't know where they
Well,
come
a lot of that comes off the stairways and deckings in front of houses and floats
Washes
down.
up
you
to
know.
all strewn with stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and it's just natural.
My 90,000 square feet is clean, and Barish's also.
Yeah.
And the entrance of private land.
Thank you.
I also put in the break wall which, across Kreider Lane, you should know, years ago. So if we ever get a hurricane, that street will never get flooded out again. That was also done by me and my husband.
I remember that. Moving ahead on board presentations, we have Chris Gobler on Lake Agawam, and I just want to say it's really, Chris, it's a big issue with me because the other day I noticed even Shinnecock itself has really darkened up since we had that last rain. And certainly Beconic has done the same thing. And I think that we all need to recognize that we're blatantly destroying our waters on eastern Long Island between the turf grass and the fertilizer and the septic. And there's so many sources of pollution that are groundwater and surface water, and we really got to pay attention to it going forward, or we're just going to have a big mess. And Agawam is a big mess now. And so maybe you can come forward and tell us how we straighten it out.
Well,
I won't pretend to have all the answers, but this is a summary of the study that I did, commissioned by former Mayor Hepley, about the potential of sewering, handling wastewater within the village. And so what I'd like to do, it looks like, let's see, we had, Joe, I don't know how we went from what we had to this. We had this up before, let's just see.
There's the clamshells.
We see the clamshells.
Anyway, I'm going to give you an overview of that study. I'm going to start with an introduction. I'm going to go quickly through the introduction because there's a lot of material in there, but I think it's relevant. I had given a presentation to the board, I want to say it was in January of 2016, I think, actually.
It's making me old.
Maybe. But anyway, not everyone in the room and who was on the board saw that, so I'm going to give that introduction and give you the results of the study. And so, Mayor, your introduction was a good one in that the backdrop for all of this is not just Lake Agawam, but what's happening actually across Suffolk County, where through the 20th century we had enormous growth, an order of magnitude increase in the population of Suffolk County. Many people don't realize Suffolk County is actually the third most populous county in New York State. More people in Suffolk than in Manhattan, than in the Bronx, than in Staten Island, than in Nassau County, than in Westchester, et cetera, et cetera. And we did this without putting in sewage treatment plants for most of the county, and therefore our groundwater is becoming progressively enriched in nitrogen. And many other studies have shown that it's occurring due to the main source of that is septic tanks and cesspools. However, it's very important to recognize that that can change on a per watershed basis, and thus the basis for this study, because I can point to places where fertilizer is more important. So that's one of the reasons we did this study. And the fact, the overarching idea that all of Long Island is a watershed, and it's very easy to look at the homes along a water body and say that's what's the problem. But I'll show you what the watershed looks like for Lake Agawam. It's large, it goes up north of Sunrise Highway, so we don't need to just think about the homes right on the lake. This is data from the very first study I ever did of Lake Agawam. That study was from 2003, so that's almost 15 years ago. And in just 1 year of study that was partly supported by the village, the table here shows the levels of total phosphorus, the water clarity, and the level of algae in Lake Agawam, and compares it to EPA standards, and essentially shows that Lake Agawam is what the EPA would classify as a hyper-eutrophic lake. So right off the bat, before doing anything, we knew 15 years ago that it had issues. And hyper-eutrophic meaning it's overfed, so to speak, as a little translation. And since that time, we've seen consistent blue-green algal blooms, as shown here. We had a very large fish kill that occurred in the lake in 2006. And the algae that grow in that pond are of concern. There are types like these that make toxins like these. Microcystis that makes microcystin, a gastrointestinal toxin. Sometimes we see something called anabena that can make something known as anatoxin A, which is a neurotoxin. So these are serious health issues. Before these toxins were given these scientific names, they were called literally fast death factor and very fast death factor. So serious compounds. Thankfully, we're not drinking Lake Agawam as a drinking water source, but if we were, we'd have to worry about it because it is a known, the toxins that I just showed you, some of them are known carcinogens. But we do need to worry about our pets. The CDC released this report recently showing that there have been hundreds of cases whereby dogs are poisoned by toxins associated with blue-green algae, the toxins I just showed you. We had a dog die in Georgia Pond in 2012. Since that time, from blue-green algae, confirmed by the New York State Department of Health. Since that time, there have been numerous cases of dogs being sickened from being in ponds on the South Fork. So this is probably one of the biggest concerns when it comes to these blue-green algae. So we know about blue-green algal blooms in Lake Agawam. They're seasonal, usually summer through fall. I mentioned the two types of toxins, and these are a serious concern for both humans, but also for animals. To put Lake Agawam in perspective, the DEC tracks blue-green algal blooms all across New York State. We're a state of lakes, as you can see here. And unlike Long Island, in many cases, the lakes or ponds are being used as a drinking water source. And I told you we need to be very concerned about these blue-green algae in a drinking water source. So where do we see these blue-green algal blooms most commonly? Surprisingly, it's in Suffolk County. The DEC has picked out 42 counties. This is somewhat dated data, but last year 42 counties came up with blue-green algal blooms. So they're looking all over the state, but it's happening more frequently in Suffolk County. Whether you look at the number of lakes, the number of weeks lakes are listed, and then if you look at the lakes that are listed for the number of weeks in a year a lake is listed, in 2014, Lake Agawam topped the entire state for the number of weeks it was listed. It's been in a similar position in years since then. I mentioned, just as a time course, we see different types of blue-green algae showing up spring going into fall. We see both classes of toxins I mentioned, so this is just showing the data. We see microcystin and anatoxin A within the lake. This is a study I published in 2007. And we worry not just about the water being green, but the fact that when the wind blows off the ocean towards land in summer, so that is from south to north, and those you probably know that's a common occurrence during summertime, as during the day when the land heats up, you can get the concentration of the blue-green algae on the shoreline, and that's when it's a very serious concern for pets and animals. And in a study many years ago, this is going back almost a decade, we actually found the toxins showing up in fish in the lake. There had been a plan, not a plan, there was an action actually, a fish being removed from the lake, carp specifically, by the town trustees. I want to say the year was 2004, 5. And that those carp were being carted off, in some cases potentially sold, until we discovered that actually these toxins were getting into the fish. So that plan ceased. And so in many cases, the Lake Agawam has been closed either by the town trustees or by Suffolk County Department of Health vis-a-vis the New York State DEC. And why do we get these events? Well, here are 4 main reasons. Poor flushing, there's no flushing at all in the lake, really. High levels of nutrients, high temperatures, and not a lot of predation. And we can't control any of those things except for the second one, and that is nutrients, and that's what this study is really about. Just to emphasize the role of nutrients in these events, I've done experiments through the years. This is a simple experiment. We take water and we either add nitrogen or phosphorus or both compounds. And what this is showing is that when you add nitrogen, that's when you get a response out of the algae. They grow more. And this is important because science would tell you traditionally that if you're dealing with a lake, you don't worry about nitrogen. Just worry about the phosphorus, because it's phosphorus that controls the algae. And that is often the case. However, in Lake Agawam, the type of blue-green algae we see are a type that we would call, in science, non-diazotrophic. What that means is they can't use nitrogen out of the atmosphere. They rely on the nitrogen in the lake. And therefore, their growth is dependent on nitrogen, which is different from a lot of other freshwater systems. So this is a study that was done more than a decade ago. This was done just a year or so ago. A similar result, that we do nothing to the water, incubated at 2 different temperatures. This is the levels of blue-green algae. If we add nitrogen, nitrate and phosphate, urea, a form of nitrogen, or nitrate, in all cases we get more of these blue-green algae. And we also get more of the toxins. Specifically, the microcystin contains nitrogen, so when we put more nitrogen in the lake, we get more of the toxin. And then also many years ago, we did a series of experiments that showed what would happen if you reduced the nutrients experimentally, and that showed that you would decrease the intensity of these events. So it could work in both ways. More nitrogen would give you a more intense and more toxic bloom. Reducing the nitrogen would make those blooms less intense. And again, thinking about nitrogen and phosphorus, I'll just emphasize once again, it's not just me and my data, but the EPA is now on board with the idea that you need to control both nitrogen and phosphorus if you're going to address these algal blooms. And again, the paradigm in the past has been just target the phosphorus. And in fact, when I gave my presentation here last time, I had to make this a very strong point because some people believe that, oh, just worry about the phosphorus. But clearly, the data from this lake is unequivocal that nitrogen is extremely important. Okay, so that's this introduction here. Nitrogen, addressing the nitrogen issue is very important. So for my study, I provided in my report, a copy of it here on the table, the current status of Lake Agawam, so I updated all the data that was available. I also summarized 2 other studies that had been previously done in the last decade about the lake. So it's a comprehensive, up-to-date report. I then created some models to understand the flow of nitrogen from land into the lakes, and then considered the idea, essentially 2 different scenarios. 1, what would happen if we created a sewage treatment plant? And then 2, what would happen with regards to updating septic systems within the village? And then looking at how that might affect the lake. Okay, so we talked about earlier on the idea of a watershed. So what I'm showing you here, I emphasize Lake Agawam, but as it turns out, the study also included flow from the water from land to the lakes for both Old Town Pond and Wickapog Pond as well. And again, here being Lake Agawam, because when we started this study, we actually didn't know what the potential sewering plan, what it would affect. And I should just also make the connection that the consulting firm H2M has a proposal to put in a sewer district for the village of Southampton. And I would rely on the mayor to provide the details of that, and also the village administrator, if people were curious about the exact details of that. But I took that information and their idea that they're going to sewer a given area and plug that into my study. And when I began the study, when I looked at the area, I was under the pretense that that project could affect all 3 of these ponds because we didn't know what the flow of water was like. So first we put together the watersheds for Lake Agawam, Old Town Pond, and also Wickapog Pond. The large colored areas here show you what is known as the 50-year watershed. And what that means is, at the very northern extent, if a parcel or droplet of water were to fall on the land here, it could take 50 years for it to make it all the way into the lake. So all of Long Island is a watershed, but it can take a while. So we also considered here, the blow-up, the 10-year watershed, and you can see that's a lot closer. And as it turns out, I'll give you a punchline early on. The planned sewering would only affect Lake Agawam, so that's good news, and that it's very targeted towards Lake Agawam, and it's only within the 10-year watershed, which means it would have a rapid effect. And so these are the different sources of nitrogen that we considered for the study. You can see them all here: runoff, fertilizer, wastewater, sediment flux, wastewater, also specifically from Main Street, something known as atmospheric deposition, which is not just the rain, but the current, the chronic flow or falling of dust from the atmosphere. Not a lot, but it actually, because that happens all the time, it also contributes nitrogen. And also the waterfowl on the different water bodies. We did this for all 3 water bodies, so a little bit of bonus here. For Lake Agawam, this is how things broke out. You can see that wastewater, if you add up these 2 numbers here, comprise nearly 70% of the nitrogen entering Lake Agawam. So by and large, by far, the very largest source of nitrogen, which is a good thing because this study is all about addressing wastewater. So right off the bat, we have the sense that we're on to the exact right target. And you can see, everything else is, you can add it up, but it's all quite small. I'll just say now that in the past, we've looked at phosphorus sources, and sediment is actually the biggest source of phosphorus. Right? But for tonight, I'm just going to really focus on the nitrogen. The other water bodies are somewhat similar. I'll go through those quickly. Old Town Pond comes up somewhat similar. You can see nearly 65% of the nitrogen coming in from wastewater. We also discovered, again, I didn't know this, but discovered through this study that it's actually the Southampton Hospital sewage treatment plant that discharges into the watershed of Old Town Pond exclusively. Does not affect Lake Agawam. Didn't know that before the study. Doesn't affect Wickapog Pond. It's just going directly to Old Town And again, fertilizer from lawns being a little bit more important for Old Town Pond. And now Wickapog Pond actually looks different. The watershed is different. It's smaller. There's a larger amount of lawns. There's fewer homes. And so actually for this water body, fertilizer is most important. And again, this drives home the point I made earlier on. Don't walk into a situation, I've learned this through the years. Don't walk into a situation and think you know the answer. Right? Because if we would have waved the magic wand and said, oh yeah, it's all wastewater, well, that's true for some, but not all water bodies. So here's one where actually wastewater is a smaller fraction, just a third of the total nitrogen. Okay. So I'll just go back and emphasize now, because this is specifically about the sewer district, from here on out, I'm really just going to focus on Lake Agawam, because it only affects Lake Agawam. And again, in Lake Agawam, 70% almost of the nitrogen coming from wastewater. And so now I'm going to show you some different scenarios whereby we think about what would the result of putting in a sewage treatment plant, how would that affect nitrogen loading to Lake Agawam. And I'm going to go through a series of scenarios, and they will build upon each other. This scenario considers only the sewage treatment plant and only the 10-year travel time for groundwater. And so if we think about that in and of itself would have a 30% reduction in the nitrogen load from land into Lake Agawam. If you were to couple that with also upgrading septic tanks in the system, it would be a 40% reduction. And I should take this time now to pause and mention what probably many people in the room know, but it's important for us to all to recognize that this study is happening in an environment where wastewater and addressing wastewater and water quality has become a very serious issue at the state level, at the county level, and at the town level. And as a consequence of that, there are now funds available for people to be upgrading their septic systems. There are funds available through Suffolk County, rebates. There will funds be shortly available through the town, similar sorts of rebates as well. And so that's one of the reasons that concurrently I added in the idea in consultation with the mayor, Mayor Epley that is, to also think about the upgrading of septic systems. Because that is now on the table. We don't really know how it's going to play out, but we will, I believe in certain areas, there will be the ability for people to take advantage of both the county and town rebate programs and replace their systems for a very small fraction of the actual total cost. So anyway, with that said, you can see within the 10-year travel time of Lake Agawam, where you would address the downtown region with the sewage district, and then also upgrade septic systems, you'd have a 40% reduction in the nitrogen. In this particular case, I'm now pulling out the things that the village can't really control. Right? You have a lot of power, but you can't control the atmosphere, for example. And I suppose you could try to control the birds. But
Fran's good at that.
however, in this particular case, I'm really only what I'm looking at here are the things that I think the village actually can control, and that is wastewater, fertilizer, and the storm drain. And there's actually at the northern end of the Lake Agawam, and actually the village has already done a lot towards that, and that has become a smaller source of nutrients through the years, but it's still there, and there still can be things done there. So if we look about just what's controllable by the village, these reductions increase so that the sewage treatment plant alone would address 40% of those sources, and 60% if it was coupled with upgrading septic systems.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mayor?
Certainly, go right ahead.
I live at the south end of Lake Agawam. Now, over all these 40-something years I've lived here, I've seen several times where water has been pumped out of the lake, going right across the street to the ocean,
yes,
and then back and forth. What has that process done to the lake water? Is that a cleansing process?
So that north end is actually not a two-way flow. It's really more of a spillway. So when the lake levels get high, it then exits out into the ocean. for this next round of considerations, instead of just considering 10-year, I'm now considering the full 50-year watershed for Lake Agawam. And this has a twofold effect. Firstly, it's the most realistic setting. It makes the impact of the sewage treatment plant smaller. However, it makes the overall impacts larger, because now you're talking about a bigger part of the total nitrogen load, and you're thinking about a larger fraction of a larger number of septic systems. So you can see that the sewage treatment plant alone is now only a 20% reduction, but if you add in the septic systems, you're at a 50% reduction of the nitrogen load going into Lake Agawam. And again, if you break this out into what's controllable by the village, this ends up being, again, a 20% reduction for the sewage treatment plant, but a 65% reduction with regards to if you included all of the septic systems. Another part of my study was to understand how would the nitrogen loading into the lake be affected if there was additional growth within the village. And people are very concerned about this, because some people, the concern that people have is that if we build the sewage treatment plant, and this isn't just for the village here, this is something that West Hampton Beach is also struggling with, and that people all across Suffolk County have been thinking about. In fact, one of the reasons we don't have sewage treatment plants across Suffolk County was the concern around 1980 that Suffolk County was growing so quickly, it would soon look like Nassau County and Brooklyn and Queens. And part of the philosophy was, if we don't build sewage treatment plants, maybe that will slow growth. And in the reverse psychology today, and I guess going back to that, we can decide whether or not that worked or not. People are worried that if we do put in a sewage treatment plant, that could then trigger additional growth. And so what I did in this part of the study was to look at nitrogen loading with and without the sewage treatment plant and consider growth. So what if you were to expand the amount of space? And I went very big. In fact, I probably went unrealistic. My growth number, it wasn't quite arbitrary, but it was signed off by the mayor. I said, what if there was 10 million additional square foot of space, commercial space, in the town area of the village? Unlikely to happen, but just let's play out that scenario. Were that to happen, and there was not a sewage treatment plant, that would increase the amount of nitrogen loading by 33% going into Lake Agawam. If we were to put in the sewage treatment plant, and again, we're just considering the downtown area, that reduces the nitrogen loading by 27%. And then finally, this last scenario shows you what happens if you build the sewage treatment plant and you have the growth, 10 million square feet of commercial space. And what it shows you is that you don't get the same reduction you would have if you didn't have the growth, but you still have a reduction in the total amount of nitrogen going into the lake. Now, I am not an advocate for growth, and that is not the purpose of this study. And there are lots of reasons to be in favor or against growth. And thankfully, that's for people like the board here to decide on. But the point being is that if you do have a sewage treatment plant, that growth you can still control the amount of nitrogen loading to a coastal water body. And you can see here, even with a large amount of growth, if that's connected to a sewage treatment plant, it doesn't have the same impact it would have if you did not have that. And in fact, you can still have a net reduction in the total amount of nitrogen loading with
either one.
Okay, this gets towards the end of my study, and that is modeling and trying to understand if you did upgrade the sewage treatment plants and the septic systems within that 50-year watershed, what would be the outcome within Lake Agawam? And to do this, what I did is took the data from 2016 and looked at the levels of blue-green algae. And so that's what's shown here in the green. And then applied a scenario whereby you would put in the sewage treatment plant only, or put that in and have the septic upgrades as well. And what that shows you is that you could be reducing the blue-green algal bloom intensity by more than 55% by putting in the sewage treatment plant and upgrading the septic systems. And then just to show you further, last year, the number of days in the season that Lake Agawam was listed by the DEC for having too high levels of blue-green algae was 80% of the time, or more than 80% of the time. However, if you were to implement the sewer district with the septic tank upgrades, the number of weeks that would happen would only be 50%. So not only lower intensity, but many times, at least more than 30 to 40% of the time, getting it below the DEC threshold for being listed. We also looked at probably the most important thing. No one wants a green lake, obviously, and that's what would correspond to the last outcome. But this is the impact on the levels of toxin in the lake, which frankly is the biggest concern, right? That's what we want to be most concerned with. And in good news, the toxin levels in the lake actually respond more acutely to decreases in nitrogen than the blue-green algae themselves. I alluded to this before, but the toxins contain nitrogen. So if you reduce the nitrogen levels, not only do you have less biomass, there's less toxins associated with that. So an up to 75% reduction in the level of toxicity within the lake. And if you look at the thresholds, you would go from having more than 75% of the time the toxins being above the recreational risk level for risk to down to below 25% of the time. And again, no one wants a green lake, but this is the greatest concern. And this has the biggest response. So you go from most of the time being above the threshold to most of the time being below the threshold, which I think is certainly good news. So I'm done. Hopefully it didn't take too long. Here's the overall summary. The last thing I'll end on is I just talked about the algal blooms, but there are many other positive outcomes that come along with this. Ecosystem benefits. Oxygen levels would improve. So you would have the rebounding of aquatic life. Water clarity would improve. So you'd have more vegetation growing on the bottom of the lake, which has sort of this snowballing effect because there's more water clarity, there's more vegetation, then there's more oxygen. And therefore there'd be more fish. And the last thing I'd say is that there's a study coming out of Sternberg University, and it's just about done, that directly links water clarity to home value. And that there's at least 2% of home value built into water clarity. Now that might not sound like a large amount, but if you consider the cost of some homes around the lake, that's a decent amount of money, I think. And so, therefore, this could benefit home values, which are linked to tax revenue, and I can go further, but that gets me out of my field of expertise. So I'll end there. I'll thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excuse me, I asked you to speak about Southampton Town Hall.
Yes.
And their phosphoric acid and nitrogen that you're pumping based on your charts straight into Lake Agawam. When I met with the Southampton town engineer, question of doing something about the 3 cesspools, there was an innuendo there that Southampton Village was considering putting in a treatment center. And I've heard prices of $20, $30 million. And my concern is if everybody's waiting for Southampton Village to spend $30 million for a sewage treatment plant, nothing's going to get done at Southampton Town Hall or the school districts. We have the 3 school districts, we have Southampton Town, and we have the hospital, which I didn't focus on. Can we put some moral pressure on these organizations to join in funding or creating a source to solve some of these problems by they're doing something with their septic system? Thank you.
I think I would say, briefly, the answer is yes. Can we do something or should we do something? And I think you're on target in that it makes sense to target these large facilities. I actually would need to go back into my study to see which of these. I know, as I mentioned, the Southampton Hospital was within the Old Town Pond watershed. I believe that may also be the case for Town Hall and the school, but I would need to go back and check that. But again, I mean, there's many ways to tackle this issue. The consulting firm H2M drafted up one way to do this, and which included a finite number of facilities and homes. Looks like I finished just in the nick of time. I was afraid that could happen. There is the possibility to expand the sewer district to include other regions and other municipalities. So, not municipality, but other facilities, other buildings as well. So, and there's also, again, for my study, what I also put in there is saying, okay, well, we're just going to, this finite area will be sewered, and other places will be dealt with on-site upgrades. And that's also an option for places like Town Hall, the schools, the hospital, excuse me, not the hospital, it's already on its own sewer stream.
I cannot speak for the board. I can't really record that request. I can't hear that.
Well, if you come forward, it'd be...
Horace Bliss, Village, Southampton resident. I cannot speak for the board of the Village of Southampton, but I've heard numbers of possibly $20, $30, $35 million for a concentrated sewering system, which is Job's Lane. And now we're talking the possibility of a much more expanded sewering system for the village. And if those numbers start climbing north of 25, 35, or $40 million, I don't think that's going to happen immediately. But what we can do is go to these organizations, the 3 school districts, Southampton Town, and the hospital, and say, you're dumping your poop in our ponds. We want you to stop it. And we can have some moral suasion. And I have one final suggestion. I think we could buy a drag line and pull all that nitrogen out of the Southampton Agawam pond and bag it and sell it as Southampton poop. We can make a lot of money.
Can I ask a question?
I think you're supposed to come up and ask it.
I don't know if I need to get up there, but I'll come up anyway.
You'll have to whisper.
They could hear at Town Hall. Yeah, they could probably hear me around the whole village. I worked on Lake Agawam and Wickapog Pond a few years ago on Wickapog. The water, I never seen a blue-green algae outbreak in Wickapog ever. I guess some of the homeowners got together and decided they wanted to clear the Phragmites around the pond. I know Phragmites don't belong here, and they came from wherever they came from, a hurricane blew them in or whatever. But they had them all cut down. The very next year was the first year that they started to see the blue-green algae. Is there anything we can do to plant a buffer around the lakes to stop some of the nitrogen from the lawns? Because I know some of the nitrogen is definitely from fertilizer on the lawn. I mean, if we had plantings around our lakes to take some of this out, would that help? And should we, I thought the DEC had a buffer around every lake to be at least 50 feet. Now, I don't know how they got a permit at Wickapog to cut down all the Phragmites, but as soon as they did that, the pond went, and it looks like a toilet bowl. So maybe we could do some plantings, because they did the surf riders did a planting in East Hampton, at the East Hampton pond where all the wastewater goes. Then they did a planting to try to take out some of the pollutants, and it seems to be actually working a little bit. So
I think the homeowners association around Lake Agawam, they have suggested, and a lot of the people down there did the
yes, I used to
plantings.
work for people that were the head of the Agawam Association, and she was like the worst. I don't want to say it, but
we'll leave it at that.
you know, they had buffers. If everybody did a buffer instead of having their lawn go straight down to the water.
Yeah, they did buffers.
You know, if we went around the whole lake, went to everybody's house and looked, I mean, you could see there's lawns straight to the water. We had plantings to take some of the nitrogen out. It would help a little bit, right? So maybe we can work on that to send maybe some letters to the homeowners around Lake Agawam to maybe plant some plantings around the lake and help out with the water situation, and maybe put plants in the water, and maybe can help to alleviate some of the toxins in the water by planting water plants in the lake to suck out some of the nitrogen. Thank you.
Chris, can I ask you, what is your take on the Phragmites situation? Because we've heard through the years, and as Fran just pointed out, it's not from here. So it seems to be some school of thought that it needs to be removed. But he just brought up a good point that from an area that was removed, all of a sudden this tide, this algae emerged. In your professional opinion, is there a correlation to that? Or, because I've heard a lot of different things from a lot of different specialists. And I don't have a clue.
Well, a couple of points. One, beyond the removal of Phragmites in Wickapog, there was also the removal of plants within the pond themselves. And so I think the answer on the Phragmites alone is not 100% clear cut. I think it's going to be system specific. But the removal of the water plants that were in there, I'm not sure if they were lily pads or what, but that certainly can play a direct role because when you've got plants that are in there, the gentleman mentioned the removal of nutrients, they also actually can shade out the pond. And also, particularly thinking about, I don't know the details of how much Phragmites and how much of the plants were removed in Wickapog. But certainly any large-scale disturbance can contribute nutrients, and definitely I would think of the two, I think the plants would be the bigger issue. There are some cases where if the Phragmites is growing very far into the pond, it can actually contribute to the pond filling in. And as that happens, if there's less total volume to the pond, what that creates is a situation whereby the nutrients coming from land going into the pond are going to a smaller volume of water, and therefore they're having a bigger effect. So, so I'd say the jury's still out on the Phragmites, but that the removal of the water plants probably did play a role.
Out that north end of the pond and made it deeper.
And that's a big part too. So the buffer zones, really what's paramount is these homes need to have a buffer zone. Because Fran just pointed out, I've had people point out to me there are a few homes along Agawam who have some beautiful green lawns going right up to the
Buffer
lake.
zones are important, for sure.
Well, Chris, I think the biggest thing is a combination of everything. We've looked at doing a sewer district here. We outlined an area in the village district, and they are very correct. It's very expensive, and the trouble is capping that expense so that by the time the project gets going, it's not twice as much, which is a really difficult procedure. But we've also made a lot of inroads in capturing a lot of stormwater runoff. We've done a project over Bowden Square where we've put in a number of rings and collected water coming off of 39, which is a big contributing source to Agawam. And we've also done some work up on Culver Hill and then out on Pond Lane itself, all with the attempt to try to capture that. But I think in your analysis, you've got to do a little bit of everything. And I think that some of the new regulations that the town has put through on upgraded septic systems, great idea. If you can't do a septic system in the village district, do you foresee that they're going to have commercial systems that are upgrades from existing? Because if they did that, then you accomplish two things. One, you accomplish controlling your nitrogen, and two, you accomplish the fear of the public that we're going to have random development because they would only sustain that particular business area.
Yeah, there are systems that are sort of an in-between. Like Suffolk County calls them Appendix A systems, and so I can't off the top of my head give you the precise flow per day, but there are systems that are specifically suited. They're not for single homes. They're not as big as a sewage treatment plant, but they sort of hit the in-between. My sense is you would need many of those in order to hit the mark for the downtown area. But there are those sorts of solutions, and I don't know what the costs, would be for that versus a small plant. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Chris, we all know that the surface water runs downhill.
Yes.
And one of your diagrams, I thought, indicated that 49%, if I was looking at our lake, came from lawn fertilizer and so on. Is that true?
For which one now?
Well, I thought you were talking about Lake Agawam.
No, for Lake Agawam, it's 70% of the nitrogen. I couldn't reopen my computer right now. But I think I remember the details. 70% of the nitrogen to Lake Agawam was from wastewater. The largest contribution of fertilizer was for Wickapog Pond. That was 35%. But yeah.
Now, you're saying what percentage from?
About 70% from wastewater.
Okay. And wastewater, of course, isn't on the surface.
Correct. This is groundwater flow going.
Does it run in all directions? For instance, if you flush our toilet here, does any of it go north as well as some go south?
No, it all will be going south. So yeah.
I mean, once you go down a foot, then you're no longer running downhill. And I was going to, well, let me come to my real question.
Okay.
How long, when you take a leak in Shippies and you flush the toilet, how long does that take to reach Lake Agawam and, say, for Village Hall and for Orest's favorite building, the Town Hall?
Well, interestingly, each one would take a different amount of time, but here on Main Street, that's all within what we call the 10-year travel time, so less than 10 years. And certainly the closer you get to the lake, the shorter that time frame is.
No, because I was concerned. I think the figure that was bandied around at some of the presentations was that the sewage system would cost $33 million, and I thought it was going to cost $1.6 million a year to run the sewage plant and so on. And of course, we were smart enough to buy a condominium that's only about 300 yards from the impact zone of the sewage treatment plant. But it's all been treated. And they say it's the difference between Mountain Dew and doo-doo. But in any event, so it's going to take 8, 9, 10 years just for the pollutants to stop, and that's that one type of pollutant. It's not the surface fertilizer or the rock salt that we put on the roads in the wintertime and all that stuff. That's going to continue to run in there. And so do you take forever and someday you say, well, it's almost like you go into surgery because you've got 5 malignant tumors and the doctor tells you, we got great news, you only have 2 now, and you say, my life expectancy went up 3 weeks or something like that. I was just wondering, we're never going to be able to swim in the lake. It's never going to be Lake Louise, right?
Well, I'm not familiar with Lake Louise, but I wouldn't discount the possibility of swimming in Lake Agawam, actually. I do think, I guess, to your points, I think we all want to move our watersheds towards them being managed in a way where that any water body would be swimmable. And that's going to take progressive action, and it won't be a magic wand. It's going to take time, but I think it's incumbent upon everyone to think about this in the long term. And maybe we don't ourselves witness with our own eyes the benefits. But I think we can all be on board with the concept that it's, we have a responsibility for tending for what we own and for passing it on better to the next generation. And
the other thing that worried me one night at the presentations, and you might have been one of the presenters, and of course you were focused on the sewage problem leaching into the lake. And I think at least somebody thought that was the principal irritant. But then another person who at least said he was an expert, he got up and said, no, it's the surface runoff, which you're not going to be able to stop that too. Obviously, as Michael was saying, we've already taken steps to do it, and I don't know what else we can do. But because it is the lowest part in the village, things are going to still run in there no matter what the hell we do. Unless, anyhow. And then the third guy stood up and said, you're both wrong. It's the layer of sediment in the bottom of the lake. If you don't remove that, it's going to boil and bubble and whatever the heck it does and so on. And just seemed to me that if you're going to spend a fortune and you're going to be 40% better off than you were, is it really worth a fortune?
Well, thankfully, I don't need to worry about the money part of things. You all do. But I just want to be perfectly clear, though. The purpose of my study was to address those issues. And so I have in front of me here, and I showed you just recently, that the runoff is only 4% of the nitrogen. And so that is not the nitrogen issue. And when it comes to the sediments, that's only 14% of the nitrogen. Now, the sediments are more important for the phosphorus. But I showed you that it's really the nitrogen that's controlling the blue-green algae in Lake Agawam, again, because I used that term.
And that's principally sewage?
Correct, 70%.
I have a question.
Yes.
So we're talking about Lake Agawam. I'm very concerned about our water supply, because our water supply comes from the ground. And if we have the majority of the public here using cesspools, some of the older houses, majority of the public here fertilizing, how long does that take before that hits the water supply that we are drinking?
So that depends on where your water's coming from, obviously, and whether you have a private well or...
Suffolk County Water has wells all over the place.
Correct. And the interesting thing about that, sometimes people say, oh, I'm on city water. Of course, there is no city water. It's either Suffolk County Water Authority.
I understand it comes from the ground.
Right. But the interesting thing is that even if you're on Suffolk County water, your water almost certainly comes no further than 3 miles away from where you're standing. And so your concern is a valid one, because what's happening in your yard and your neighbor's yard is affecting your drinking water supply. The good thing on Suffolk County Water Authority is that they have one of the best laboratories for testing drinking water in the country, and they test all their water very frequently. And they make sure that they're delivering drinking water that's within the bounds of what's regulated by the EPA. And so, I won't say that every drop of water is going to be pristine per se, but it's being tested.
But I wonder, because one of the wells is on the other side of County Road 39 off of North Main Street, and that was all farm fields at some point, and before it was ever regulated, those farm fields were putting all sorts of pesticides and all sorts of stuff in that ground.
Yep.
I mean, what happens to that? I mean, we all know about Sagaponack and the Temec and how they had to put filters on all those wells that they used out there, and people have to use Temec filters on their property, and what happened there. But I want to know, if every person goes out and fertilizes their lawn of their property, how long does that take before it hits the water? And then what can happen to that? I mean, will it ever affect it to such a degree that we won't be able to use that water?
Well, it's your second question. Yes, that is possible. And so, and your question before that, how long? Actually, groundwater travels downward very quickly. So while it can take 50 years to travel in the horizontal, it can travel in the vertical very, very rapidly. But again, recognize that Suffolk County Water Authority has, literally thousands and thousands of wells. They have the ability, thankfully, to drill deeper, and they've done that through the years. So almost no one is getting what they call upper glacial groundwater anymore, because it's all contaminated. And therefore the wells are hundreds of feet within the Magathie. And further, they have other options like shutting down a well. So if the levels get too high, they say we're no longer going to use that, and they'll drill a new one. That'll either go deeper or just be elsewhere. And then thirdly, they do something called blending. And then so if the levels start to get too high, they'll say, well, we're going to use half of this, but we're going to mix with that water that's up there where the levels are lower. So,
but with a community that is truly sitting out in the middle of the ocean and the bay system, surrounded by salt water, does it ever come to a point where they have to drill so far down that they are connecting to that? And will that ever happen? I mean, if we keep looking and looking and looking for fresh water,
certainly that, I mean, I don't I
I'm
think
concerned about us contaminating
Yes.
what we
And it's
really need to use.
Yes, and it's a
Yeah.
valid concern, and I think that's why, again, that comes just back to in my mind, is the ethic and the responsibility of all of us to take care of our surface water, our drinking water, our groundwater. And so, it doesn't, and therefore I don't think anybody gets a free pass on that. We all have to bear responsibility. But, thankfully, again, we do have, in the meanwhile, Suffolk County Water Authority does have the ability to drill deeper, drill further, and provide drinking water that meets the standards of the US EPA.
So basically, you're saying anything anyone can do as a community or certainly as a governing body, anything is never futile.
That's right, and I think the purpose of this study was to specifically drill down and say, well, what would be most effective, right? So, and what this study came out and said is that, well, if you want to reduce nitrogen, 70% of that nitrogen coming to Lake Agawam is from wastewater, so that's the thing to hit, and that's the purpose. That was the purpose of the study, right? Because it would have been before the study, maybe the decision was, we'll do a fertilizer ban, which would move the needle. But here it would only move the needle maybe 10% if you banned all fertilizer. And so, yes, we should do all that we can, but also use the best science available. And now there is some good science available to make targeted decisions that effectively use.
Because a lot of the other things were the easier ones to approach, the low-hanging fruit, I'll call it.
Right.
Like as the mayor pointed out, over the past 10 years, we've been extremely aggressive in capturing runoff into the lake. And I think your study, you pointed out, there's been a significant reduction.
Yep.
Not to zero, but significantly reduced. Mayor pointed out, Windmill Lane, Hill Street, all across, we've been very aggressive. But that's only part of it. But that's been recognized. We have buffer zones, we have associations, quasi-private public associations to reduce fertilizer and buffer zones. So that's been recognized. So the last part of this equation, which has always been the largest part of the equation, is the nitrogen from wastewater.
Yep.
I have an idea how we can start funding this. Anybody want to hear it?
Sure.
Firewood sale?
Well, it's obviously something we really have to consider and look into funding, and it sounds like they're saying 28 to 30 million, it's going to be double or triple that amount.
Yeah.
Luckily, we live in a town that has a lot of very, very extremely wealthy people, but it still needs funding, and it still needs the help of everyone involved. I say hit the public Works Department first, the ones that are supposed to clean the beaches. See how much we saved this summer between Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day. That's a couple of million that could start it. Then we'll all chip in after that. Get those guys first. My suggestion.
Duly noted.
Any other questions for Chris?
I have a question. Professor Gobler, Bob Jeffrey, I actually live on Lake Agawam. I've been doing some research, and it's my understanding that the town of East Hampton, maybe Suffolk County, and maybe the town of Southampton are now requiring people, when you do either build a new house or you do a major renovation, to put in these advanced septic systems. Is that something that the village of Southampton should be requiring people to do when they do a big development?
That's a good question. I think that just as a point of clarification, that has not passed in, Suffolk County is considering that.
But by the end of the year.
By the end of the year,
East
that's
Hampton,
right.
I think just did it though.
I believe you're right, and I believe Suffolk County is planning to do it for the start of the new year. But yeah, I think that, eventually we want to target upgrading all systems, and the easiest thing to do would be to target systems that in new construction or upgrades to homes. I think that makes sense, again, as an easy, low-hanging fruit action. Yeah, I think that makes good sense.
Reading RSD, but in reading the Southampton Town proposed legislation with respect to the funding, which is the CPF funds, the 20% of the 2%, that's been adopted by Southampton Town. I don't know if Southampton Village has adopted any a statute or any law regarding this. And in reading it, you're dealing with the Southampton administration, Southampton Town administration, and I don't know how Southampton Village or any of the 7 incorporated villages in town of Southampton, where do they stand with respect to this law that we're talking about right now?
Well, of course, funds are available, even if you're a village resident, there are funds available for upgrading the septic system. And as it was pointed out, by the first of the year, Suffolk County Health is going to require any upgrades, village, town, any upgrades in the county to conform to the new septic systems. So they're basically ahead of any legislation that the village can possibly put forward.
But we'll benefit from it.
And yeah, everybody will benefit from it.
Could we ask the learned professor to prepare a report that could be distributed to all of the citizens?
I did.
He did. He has.
It's available up there.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
And if it's not already up...
I think it's on our website. I believe it's on our website.
Okay, and it's also on the website.
When you first did it, yeah.
Very good.
Still up there.
It's also on the website, so if anybody doesn't have a printed copy, they can get it right off the website. But without a doubt, I think going forward, all of eastern Long Island is really susceptible to our water that surrounds us. I think that we have about 75% water in the town of Southampton. And to, as you pointed out, to disregard it and to not accept the responsibility that all of us are impacting it is not what we want to see, and it's not going to help the bays. And a lot of the water quality in that last rainstorm that we had, which was pretty significant, has drastically and very quickly gone down in quality. And I think the Southampton College did a eelgrass bed, didn't they, recently in Shinnecock, which...
Yes, the Shinnecock Bay Restoration Program every year is expanding the eelgrass beds across Shinnecock Bay,
right,
as well as planting millions of clams and oysters to filter the water.
And I will tell you from a guy that makes his living building fishing rods and reels, told me that bed attracts more different species of fish than he's ever seen. And he called me just today, actually, very concerned that this stormwater runoff that we had recently is going to kill that project.
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
One quick question. You say that clams and oysters absorb the impurities that are in the water? Is that what you're saying?
So they're filter feeders. They filter the water out, so they eat by filtering the water. And so
What good does that do if it's not taking the impurities out?
Well, the impurities are sometimes in what they're filtering. So I'm
just worried about eating clams and oysters.
Highly regulated by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
You're still here, Bill, so relax.
Yeah. Well, the tomato sauce neutralizes everything? Is that it?
There you go.
Perhaps.
In 27 years since I did that one.
Any additional questions? Well, Dr. Gobler, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Just say that I'm happy to work with the village further, either with regards to this plan or other plans. Steve knows how to contact me.
Yeah,
So.
we'll certainly be contacting you because for me it's a very serious issue.
Okay, it's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for the update for everybody. Thank you. There was the room.
Moving ahead, we have communications to the board.
Okay, first one's from Southampton Soccer Club. The fall soccer season is upon us. Southampton Soccer Club would like to use Downs Family Park for training and gameplay for the upcoming fall season of Long Island Junior Soccer Travel Team play. On behalf of the SSC, I would like to request permission to use the Downs Family Park soccer fields beginning from the week of August 28th through November 24th from 4 to 8 during the weekdays and on weekends from 9 to 5 for gameplay. An updated copy of the SSC limited certificate insurance will be forwarded to your office in the beginning of September when the policy is renewed. As always, thank you very much for your consideration. If you require any further information, don't hesitate to phone my office. Tim Rumpf, President.
I think they've always done this.
Yep, it's all consistent stuff.
So I'd make a motion to allow the Southampton Soccer Club to use the Downs Family Park for their training game as stipulated in Tim Rump's letter dated August 14th, 2017.
There's a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And also another repeat, Mahoney Associates, we'd like to use the Downs Family Recreational Park on Flying Point on Monday, September 18th from 12 to 6 with a rain date or replacement date of Monday, September 25th. This is our annual company barbecue with approximately 40 people to be in attendance. We've been very fortunate to be able to use this fabulous facility for the past 4 years. As always, we will be responsible for removal of all trash generated during the barbecue. Don Mahoney, President.
Since they've done this numerous years, and I think they've always picked up after themselves.
Yeah, they're good sports. I'll make a motion that we approve that.
Okay. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Last one is the Southampton Public Schools. I'm writing to request permission to hold the Southampton High School Homecoming Parade on Saturday, October 14th at 9:30. Parade route will begin at Southampton Elementary School and proceed as follows. Hampton Road towards Main Street to Job's Lane, Job's Lane to Windmill Lane to Hampton Road. The route will conclude back at the elementary school parking lot by 10:30. We are aware that October 14th coincides with the Village Southampton Fest. It is our hope that the parade might aid in your efforts to bring awareness to your event and that families participating in the parade will come into the village before that afternoon's homecoming varsity football game. Sincerely, Nicholas Dino, Superintendent.
On that, they wanted it later, didn't they? And then we told them that 9:30, we think we could accommodate them. Okay. And the intent is that we're going to try to get free rides to the schools so that they could come back and partake in Summerfest.
And then we would go back for the game.
Right.
And then come back.
Full day in village.
Any comments from?
No.
This is the first year we're having this collide, so to speak, if you think of it that way, but maybe it won't.
Once before we had it where they had done it on Friday night, which was a direct impact with the Rotary Club, and so we asked that it not be on Friday night because it would definitely negatively impact the Rotary Club benefit. So they came back to Saturday morning and we thought it would time out.
Yeah, better benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Full day.
And really, what time does the Southampton Fest really get going? Is it really early, like that early?
11 to 12.
Yeah.
The charter contest starts at 12, so people start
But they'll
coming
be
down
back.
at 11. They'll be done in 45 minutes, they said.
Yeah, breeze through.
It's quick.
That's quick, yeah.
Timing might work out good this way anyway. Yeah, that's a nice kind of fit. But again, if you guys think it's all right, and you guys do it, so.
Well, that makes me feel better.
I'll make the motion to accept the request to hold the Southampton High School Homecoming Parade on Saturday, October 14th at 9:30.
Second?
Second.
Favor? Aye. Okay, resolutions, item 1. Resolve that the reading of the minutes of the public session of August 10th, 2017 be dispensed with and that those minutes be accepted as filed by the village administrator and the actions taken at that meeting be and hereby are ratified and approved. Have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the claims for the warrants dated August 22nd, 2017, totaling $480,639.14, warrant 5 general fund, $76,393.95, warrant 3 capital reserve fund, and the village payroll through August 17th be audited and approved. Got a motion?
Move.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Page 1, Arrow International, Ambulance Medical Supplies, $1,210.54. Atlantic Coast Embroidery, Fire Department Shirts, $3,729.68.
Page 2, the annual contributions to the capital reserve account, in the amount of $100,000. Carrier Corporation Fire Department HVAC service contract, $1,655. Forwest Auto Body July Towing, $2,700. Page 3, East Coast Mines and Materials, Highway Carting and Supplies, $1,512. East End Hose Testing, annual hose testing for the fire department, $8,801.51. Finance Manager, annual maintenance contract for the computer software program, $8,437. Four-Star Refrigeration, Fire Department Appliance Repair, $1,190. Fundamental Business Services, collection fees for the court for July, $3,636. Page 4, Health Research, Ambulance Training Conference, $1,875. Incident Response Technologies, Annual Maintenance Agreement for the Fire Department, $4,124. Michael Kemp, Medical Reimbursement, $1,000. Page 5, Long Island Truck Parts, Dump Truck Fuel Tank, $2,912.09. Moore Medical Corporation, Ambulance Supplies, $1,379.03. Norsec and Son, Carting for the Parks, $1,025. Page 6, New York State Health Insurance for September, premium $309,940.73. Otis Ford, Fire Department Truck Repair, $2,333.57. Page 7, Rapid Recovery Towing Services for July, $3,700. Page 8, Sprague Operating Reserve, 3,000 gallons of gasoline for $5,316. Suffolk County Vocational Educational and Extension Board, Fire Department Manuals, $1,100. Page 9, Vince Toomey Legal Fees for July, $1,370.40. Town of Southampton Dumping Fees, $2,777.40. And the last warrant is a capital reserve warrant, 2 payments to Alliance System Integrators for the alarms and camera systems for 25 Pond Lane, $71,067.48, and 25 Jobs, $5,326.47. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3, resolve that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following payments from the Capital Reserve Fund, subject to permissive referendum. Alliance System Integrators, $76,393.95 from the Facilities Reserve. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Can we have discussion on that? What is that actually?
That's the 2 capital reserve payments that I mentioned for the fire alarm and camera systems that we're installing in all the buildings.
Okay.
And that's just 25 Jobs and 25 Pond.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Item 4, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of Bailey Sullivan as a lifeguard at Cooper's Beach at an hourly rate of $16. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the refund of a building permit fee in the amount of $100 to Kurt Strunk as recommended by Jonathan Foster, Building Inspector. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second? This is just his letter, and he was putting up a fence, and he decided to withdraw it. All in favor?
Aye.
And the last one, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of Daniel. Rich, you want to go for it?
Go for it. Come on, I want to hear what you say.
Daliakseyia as a beach attendant at an hourly rate of $9.
Alexeia?
Alexeia? Say that?
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
The vowel.
There you go. Okay. Discussion items. The first one is proposed local law of 2017 with regard to the annexation of property that was done in 2013. This is at the Bishop's Pond development, where when that development was put together, the site was divided between part town, part village. We annexed the property through a series of public hearings, both on the village side and the town side, to bring it all into the village. And this is just, the point here is a little house cleaning to get this onto the zoning map. And this is just, purpose is just to schedule a public hearing for our next board meeting, which will be September 14th. Mike, you want to go a little further into that with...
Well, when the project was done, if everybody remembers, but part of it was the town and part of it was the village, and the village was in the R20 zone, and the town was, I think, in a light industrial zone. And when they merged, we never completely rezoned it so that they were all the same. So the purpose of this law is to bring it all into an R20 zone, And that doesn't mean that we may not have a request down the road for, because it is all condo units, for a change of that. But this will be, at least we'll get this on the map as an R20.
Makes sense to me.
So we have a motion to schedule the public hearing for September 14th?
Make the motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
And the last one is a request for a Cystic Fibrosis Foundation ride on September 16th. It's a Saturday, I believe, right, Julie? 2017. And this is another annual event.
All the regular ones, right? Yeah. Plus it's a ride.
Any question on the event or where they go, or? I think we've done this every year.
We have done this. This
Yeah.
is another one that we do.
Yeah. How many miles? Is that 62?
Yeah.
Julie, I'm not doing that one.
Village, town of Southampton.
You've got something.
The biking's easier. Yeah, it starts out, at the dock.
Okay.
And the route looks like it's the same?
Nothing changed on it, same one.
It's just Hill Street to Somerset, and then Moses over to that back to the highway.
In the same time frame as it is every year, so no
Yes.
conflicts, same, okay, consistent.
Is there signage? Because last year I saw a few stragglers that were lost, I think.
I'm not
They
sure.
usually put it on the road.
Do they?
Yeah, they usually put a mark on the road on where to go.
Last year, the issue was it was during,
No, they just end up in one of the restaurants
but
or bars.
luckily they moved.
Okay, good.
I'll make a motion then to accept the Sisters Fibrosis Foundation ride on Saturday, September 16th, 2017.
Second?
Second?
Favor?
Aye. Right.
Aye.
Are they using any of the departments for the police, for road? Or, so I don't even.
It's a good question, Rich. Do you think we need it?
No, they haven't had it throughout, then that's fine. The main question for that is if then they're just using the road, which is a public road, so they're kind of letting us know as a courtesy. We step in and we're actually utilizing resources, taxpayer resources, but they're not, so they can ride on our road.
60 participants isn't a lot.
Well, that's quite a bit when you get them on bikes.
If they're clustered like the,
No, but they're spread out. They're not too bad.
Moving along here, we have comments from the board members. Trustee Skrebsky?
No, I'm good. We covered quite a bit tonight. The Ag one was a good refresher, having
No, that was very good.
and redo his presentation. That was good. So I'm good.
Trustee Allen?
yes, I have a couple of things. The first is the Planning Commission is holding a public workshop on Saturday, September 16th, right here in Village Hall in the boardroom where we're now sitting. The goal of this September 6th workshop is to share the remaining zoning proposals with the public that resulted from the May 2016 zoning study that all of you supported and commissioned. By way of background, the Planning Commission, as Mayor Irving likes to refer to it as, is our think tank, and they bring forward, a lot of good thoughts around what studies we should have, and then evaluating those studies, and ultimately come to the Board of Trustees to recommend zoning changes and also enhancements to our master plan and other critical studies of the village. But this zoning study is very important because there were about 12 or 13 recommendations put forward last May. One of them has come through, and it had to do with side yard setback. It's now, I think it went from 10 feet to 15 feet. But there are some other things in there that are very worthwhile, so I'm encouraging the public to come and listen and provide feedback. There'll be other opportunities, but this is the first in a series of public sessions. And then on the note of the boards, on the topic of boards, we would like to thank all the volunteers on all the different boards. I know we have Mr. Broadleaf in the audience from the ARB. It's a little bit of an empty crowd here. No offense to you, Fran. But there's the ZBA, the ARB, the Planning Board, the Planning Commission, and they spend countless hours reviewing materials and applications and discussing this in sessions prior to having the public meetings. I've attended all of these meetings now for the past 6 weeks, and one ZBA session that I attended started at 7 and went to, I think, 1:45. So, you know, this is all volunteer work. It's a labor of love and a passion. Thank you very much. I'm sure you all agree, but...
No, I would add to that I have incredible confidence in our boards. You know, you often see these debates going back and forth, and there are a lot of issues that take place on the side, but overall, they all have the same idea. They're doing it for the benefit of Southampton Village, and that's a very positive thing.
And the second thing I wanted to mention is, given Planning Commission, Paul Travis, who chairs that, along with Joe McLaughlin, who has recently been appointed, we met up with Mary Wilson yesterday. She heads the CPF fund and is the program manager. We wanted to understand, you know, what is the mission of the fund? How is the decision-making process approached? What can we do better? And it was a very interesting 2-hour meeting. One thing we did learn, and many of you may not know this, is that the CPF fund now allocates 20% of its proceeds that it collects on the real estate transfer tax for environmental purposes. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of revisit what that could potentially be and triangulate that with our master plan and some of our other studies to kind of have it all come together and then go back to them with a wish list so that we're prepared to be at the table at the right time going forward. That's good.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Yep. The allowing some of the CPF stuff to reach out to some of the issues that we have certainly will help all of us, and especially you guys that have an interest in the beach and so forth, because down Meadow Lane, you see so much turf grass. Everybody's got a greener lawn than the next guy, and to do that makes a big, big impact on everything around you. And if we can address some of those issues, we're way ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Kimberly? Vincent again.
Okay, so I have for the last, I would say, 2 years corresponded with a person who lives on Pelham. Pelham is one of the cuts-through streets. You go up West Prospect and over in Pelham and then around to Moses. And he's been extremely frustrated as it's getting worse, and that was earlier we had this conversation about all those little areas. I'd really like to see if we should maybe throw some lines down there, see how many people are using those roads and try and figure out different ways. But anyway, he took it upon himself to write to Fred Thiel. I think he got a little frustrated because we weren't doing enough over there. And Fred wrote back to him, I am responding to your letter regarding the residential street traffic in the village of Southampton. Thank you for sharing your situation with me. I sympathize with your frustration concerning the speeding and noise you're experiencing in your neighborhood. As you are aware, the Village of Southampton already has the authority to implement your suggestions, traffic tickets, no-turn signs, road bumps, and one-way streets to ameliorate these tongue twister, these issues. While I understand that you have contacted the village trustees, I would also recommend that you reach out to Mayor Mark Apley. This was written quite a while ago, if you have not done so previously. On a related topic, I have successfully sponsored legislation to lower the speed limits in the village of East Hampton, the village of Sag Harbor, to 20 miles per hour. Both of these bills were passed and signed into law by Governor Cuomo. Should the village of Southampton desire to lower the speed limit on certain residential streets, I would gladly consider introducing similar legislation on their behalf. Again, thank you for your letter. Please do not hesitate to contact me regarding any other state matter of importance to you. So, I mean, I think, we never knew we could do road bumps, and I certainly am not suggesting it all over the place because that would be a disaster. He had talked to me about one-way streets. Is there any way that we could have some one-way streets, especially in these areas that, are getting traffic coming off of County Road 39, hoping to get a shortcut rather than sit in traffic. And they're being inundated over there, it's filtering. And I think it's interesting because it was brought up that it's now they're shooting through the estate area. Yeah, they are, because they're coming down these little side streets, going onto Hill Street, getting frustrated with Hill Street, shooting down some of these other things. It's a beautiful scenic route to go that direction. So now everyone is affected by this, not just the people who live north of Hill Street. Everyone is being affected by this. Maybe we should do a study on some ideas on how we can curb some of this, no pun intended, but I mean, we have to do something.
You're right on, Nancy, and I'm glad to see that we can, because I've always been told, you can't lower the speed limit in the village.
Yeah.
And here it
actually,
indicates
that was a good point of that. Yeah, no, you can. That's what I was just going to point out. The operative part of that letter is that we just can't do it on our own. We have to go to the state.
He'll help
to do
us.
it. No, but that's the procedure.
Right.
So that's what a lot of people. So you're right on the part. As a village, we don't have the authority. We have limited capabilities. Some streets we can put to 25.
Well,
but
he's
once
saying
we go,
20.
No, but that's where you'd have to go to the state.
Right.
We can go down to 25 on our own, but there's only a certain amount we can do within our village boundaries. Beyond that number allowed, we have to go to the state. To then go to 20, or any other speed limit for that matter, we have to go right to the state.
Mm-hmm. So we have 25 on Hill. How is that working for us? That's clearly marked when you enter the village.
Well, enforcement's what...
It's about the enforcement. And the enforcement's been ramped up. The enforcement's working well. And also keep in mind, too, reducing the speed limit does a couple of things. It's not just about lowering the because if a person's going to speed, they're going to speed regardless of what the posted speed limit. What it does in enforceability is it makes it a ticket, a sizable ticket from speed limit. So if a guy's going 50 and a 35, it's a bigger ticket going 50 and a 25. So part of your hope is a deterrent of the fine. But again, I don't care what speed limit you put there. If a person's going to do it, they're going to do it. So it's about enforcing it, which we have it. But as far as the filtering on toll side roads, it's rats getting off the sinking ship. There's only X amount of roads to use, and they keep finding new ways to...
Interestingly, road bumps are referred to as sleeping policemen in the UK, and I believe in a few other of our Commonwealth countries, but you don't need the same type of enforcement with that. But I agree with you. I think it's gotten out of hand. I've received several of these documents, and
And you know what? I use West Prospect. If I'm heading west, I'm right on West Prospect Street. And I'm crossing over Pelham, and I'm turning onto Moses. Except when I realize that the traffic's backed up, I turn around. So I'm guilty too. And you know what?
We all are.
I mean,
so it's tough if you start doing one way. Remember, it's always a double-edged sword because you start implementing some very drastic changes. Remember, you're also the people that get impacted are ourselves, the ones who use this every day,
right?
Not just the ones you're trying to address.
I mean, this person who lives on Pelham, he feels there's huge truck traffic there. Truck traffic there, yes.
Truck traffic. Now that's something you can put.
Yeah, I think Charlie wants you.
You know the rules.
And he's sitting behind you, so you got to be careful.
Francis Adamczewski, 40 West Prospect Street. Things with traffic speed bumps, I don't think it's a good idea because the guy's going to plow the snow in the wintertime and you're going to end up.
That's why we don't have the plow. DPW.
The thing is, there's signs on the bottom of the hill of West Prospect and on Halsey Street when you enter it. No commercial traffic.
I know, and they're
delivery.
There.
Maybe we could have some enforcement of stopping the commercial use of the traffic going through, because that's a big issue. There's a lot of landscapers, and when Gilo's was up at the place when they used to have Gilo's and dump there, they used to use that road quite a bit. And, they're a commercial business, and maybe there's some way we can eliminate some of the traffic going through some of the roads is to stop the commercial use of the roads.
Two things about that. It falls in line with the speed limit legislation thing. You have to go through certain hoops to do that. Secondly, because these are all things that through my years here, sitting down with the chiefs, the different chiefs, as a matter of fact, and different Ron Hill, different traffic study people, and we keep revisiting this. And part of the issue of limiting weight on certain streets, especially the particular artery you're talking about, because you go down Prospect, and we do. You can only put them some areas, but then the issue becomes if you remove it from that road, you're displacing it. You're not removing it, you're displacing another street, and then which street then? And then, so not to
That's why
we always go around like a dog chasing its tail.
Towards Ox pasture in that way now, because people go, all right, Hill Street's clogged. I'm just going to sneak around the back way and then snake ahead of it.
But that's part of it. But when it comes to changing road legislation, you have to remember that it's not removing it. It's not eliminating it. It displaces it. And you have to be mindful of where it's being displaced to. And that's an issue that...
I also think we need better enforcement, and I'm not saying bad things about the police department, but,
Maybe we need some more police.
Yeah,
we need more enforcement.
We need to hire more part-time.
You're not supposed to have big trucks on Jobs Lane or Main Street. We're not supposed to have big trucks on Jobs Lane or Main Street. And yet I've seen huge trucks on Main Street going down Main Street, and I'm like, why? And we have a whole bunch of policemen standing all over the place, and and I know it's just summer police, but, couldn't they call in and say, gee, there's a big truck on the street now?
You'll have to talk
that's what I'm saying. There's things that are going on out there that are frustrating, that, are not being looked into. So, I see U-turns still all over the place.
Yeah,
U-turns across,
Part of living here.
You can't catch them all. 30 happen,
No, you
you
can't
catch 5 of them.
But I also have to say, this is awful.
Yeah, that's
this is pretty bad. To think that people are pulling onto somebody else's...
I've seen it done before, people parking in beach parking lots and walking over to the estate to work there.
And that's terrible, too.
And they have a sticker, so it's like, what do? What they do is they have a sticker for the parking lot to go to the beach, but they're working for the owners next door.
Right.
So what do you do?
And that's it too. One point about you just brought up, and that this is not to defend it, but it is a temporary situation, because that is a project that will end, and seemingly, hopefully, that traffic will end.
That's the thing.
But how do you not know there's not going to be another one on the street?
Well, you don't, but the point, this is the same situation we ran into when we put all the parking restrictions around Elm Street and Helen and Pulaski. The first people that complained when we put all the no parking were the actual residents of the street, because now we were prohibiting them from doing everything they wanted to do. So, again, you have to always be mindful of actually who you're impacting when you change legislation. And everything is down to parking, speeds.
It's going to be affected no matter what you do.
Exactly. But that can be addressed in particular short-term ways when it comes to a project.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
I get one other question is about the picnic area parking in the parking lot. Are you allowed to park in the parking lot if you have 4x4? I know Mark said if you had a 4x4 sticker, you're allowed to park in the parking lot at the helicopter pad?
As of
you don't have
now,
a village pass?
right, as of now, you need a village parking sticker.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have 4x4?
That was the plan, but it was...
That's the, the plan is, and we never fulfilled it yet.
Okay, because I was just making sure, because somebody was asking me, and I was like, I'm not sure, so I wanted to
As it is
clear the
now,
air.
you need a village.
I didn't want to say, yeah, you're allowed to park there, and then all of a sudden you get the ticket, and I'm like, Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Thanks. Nice piece of wood.
You can have it if you'd like.
Yeah.
Go good on my front porch.
Nails already in it, ready to apply.
Trustee Hattrick.
A couple of quick things, I'll go quickly. I was down at Road A a week or so ago, and I was kind of happy because I think there were 6 vehicles on one side of the road and 5 on the other, and yet there was enough room for them to back out and so on without clogging each other up. Of course, I was hoping that Wayne would be here tonight, because I think he was going to look into it, but I do think we should widen that by another 6 feet or something, make it 25 feet, and make sure that the base in there is such that a regular car isn't going to get stuck in there. I also saw that, Halsey Neck Lane parking lot really is the choice other than Cooper's Beach, and it fills up. There's only, I think, 22 parking places there, and I'd mentioned to you adding parking on Halsey Neck Lane itself, south of the Little Creek overpass, and there's quite an area in there, and darned if there weren't 4 cars parked there that day. There's no signage near that. And yet I ran into John Kosciusko in the supermarket the other night, and he told me that all 4 of them got tickets, which I feel badly about. I hope you will take a look at that. And Wayne was going to look into what kind of setbacks, and honestly, I think we could create another 20 parking places there. They would, or in that intersection of Halsey Neck and Meadow Lane, and that they would require, of course, Road A does not require a village sticker, but everybody needs to enjoy those beaches, so I'm not going to worry about that. And but on the Halsey Neck and the north side of Dune Road, why, if we could add 20 places that were sticker parking, it certainly isn't going to hurt us financially. And the other thing, we'd gotten this letter from 40 Meadow Lane wanting to put a 200-ton crane in front of 40 Meadow Lane to fix some problem that's developed on the ocean side of their house. Of course, the GD owner of this house has no side yards. It's quite a thing, and I was kind of very unimpressed. And another thing that's a problem with that is that they show this picture of this crane, and it's massive, and it's got all kinds of weights on it because the boom is going to be 180. They want to dangle something over the house and try and fix some screw up that all those workmen have been working for 36 months trying to build. I can't believe that there's a plate glass window that they screwed up. But I'm very unsympathetic to this, but I do think, Steve, another consideration is if that boom, as this picture shows, is going to go over the neighbor's property, he'd probably have to get permission from that neighbor to do that, and I cannot believe that neighbor would give him permission to to go swimming in the Atlantic, and so I think he's out of luck, and maybe we should tell him to just call some barge company and hope they can come in
He
from the
hasn't come back
Atlantic.
to me yet, so.
Yeah, okay, but anyhow, I'm damn well dead set against that. Other than that, it's time to blow this popcorn stand.
Any other comments from anybody? No comments from anyone? Okay.
I have one comment. This is a follow-on to Trustee Hattrick's comment. I had a very nice tour by the Encyclopedia of Alphabet Roads today, Fran, and we did look at Road A, and it was interesting because Paul Travis has worked with the Planning Commission on analyzing parking, and that if you diagonally park, you can actually enlarge the number of parking spots. And it looked like, I'm not an arborist, and it looked like, to Trustee Hattrick's point, if we could just clear some of the yardage, cut 2-3 yards to the west, we could actually allow more parking. But again, I don't understand the vegetation. I don't want to disrupt any of the native vegetation, but it did not look like that. So perhaps that's something we could...
Are we allowing, Mayor, are we allowing parking now? I mean, I know there's been some conflicting comments.
We haven't done anything with the parking in there.
Okay.
As of date.
Can I just say one more thing, too? There's an ad that many of you probably have seen I see it on CNN all the time, by Hampton Jitney, that there are over 20 golf courses in the Hamptons.
That is the worst ad, and they
Well-
tell you they're going to take you out and you can play golf. Now, how can they play golf if they're private?
Well, what they don't tell you is what it costs to belong to a golf club. I've belonged to Southampton Golf Club for 60-some years, and these people that want to go to the beach, damn few of those 20 golf clubs, I'll bet you 19 of them you're not even welcome, unless you've got a pedigree a yard long and of course a checking account to match. And playing golf, even at Southampton, I'm amazed. I just got a bill for last month, and it's only $27 for a cart for free because I can't walk it anymore. But anyhow, it still was $600 and some dollars, And for a lot of people, going to the beach is important. It's all they got. They live all year for it, and I think we should fight like hell to give them all we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. On that note, no further comments. I make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing legal matters.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.